Folks come in just a moment, but it's wonderful to see everybody. I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to teach again. I'm doing fine, and I appreciate all of the well wishes and prayers and all those kind of things. In a little bit, we're going to ask Robert Carter to lead us in a word of prayer, but let's wait just a minute, Robert, and see who else comes in. I want to mention to y'all again something that I said previously. These classes that we're in right now are the technically most challenging classes that we have to talk about. And the biggest change between the first time I taught this class and this time is in the section that we're in right now, radiometric dating, because that is the most difficult, or let me say it's at least the part that I'm least familiar with. And so I've had to learn more new information, and I almost shudder to think about some of the things I said first go around as compared to now. I know a little bit more, and if I teach it again, I'll probably know some more after that. But I'm going to have to work at the best of my ability as a teacher in these classes, and you are going to have to work at the top of your game as well. We always think about a teacher's responsibility, but the participants have a responsibility as well, and y'all are the best. Y'all are the best at doing that. I'm going to ask you, if you would please, to be turning to Genesis chapter 6. Our foundation reading this morning is going to be Genesis chapter 6. We are moving toward the episode of the worldwide flood in Noah's day. And during that, you think about what the world became like. From the time of creation to the time of Noah, sin became worse and worse until it's described as the thought of man's heart being only evil continually. I like to think there's still a lot of good people in the world today. I would like to think that we're not to that point yet. But what would it be like to live in a world where, there are only 8 faithful people, in the entire world? And so much so that it says God repented or regretted of making man, and that gets back to man's choice. Sin left on its own tends to become worse over time. Would y'all agree with that statement? Left unchecked, left to its own devices, sin tends to multiply over time. And the older I get, the plainer that becomes to me. It really does. The older I get, the plainer that becomes. I see it in congregations. I see it in churches. A church drifts a little bit away from the truth, and then if you're not careful, they start doing other unscriptural things. I was thinking about, and I don't know everybody's background here, but I remember, for example, when I was a teenager, it was the Oak Hills Church of Christ. And then I noticed that they changed the sign to Oak Hills, a Christ-centered fellowship. And you go, well, that's okay, and then I noticed they've dropped the Christ-centered, and now it's just Oak Hills Church. And I would just point out that that's the way that things tend to go. And just weigh that out for yourself. Just think about that for yourself. So we have to constantly be on guard. And we're going to do some reading here in just a minute. But Robert, would you word a prayer for us, please, sir?
Heavenly Father, Almighty God, who created the heavens and earth, we are thankful for all the many blessings you share with us each and every day. We thank you for this morning, this opportunity we have to study more of thy word. As we study Genesis and the creation of the earth, the evidence that we see coincide with the truth of the word. Be with us as we study more of thy word, and be with us as we engage in worship this morning. Be with us, give service hands, in Christ's name we pray.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. So we're going to pick up and do just a little bit of reading in Genesis chapter 6, and we're going to begin in verse 5. So this is Genesis 6 and verse 5. And I don't know, Belinda, have I ever asked you, do you read or not? Okay. Reminds me one time I was standing up in front of giving announcements, and I said, we're missing a lot of our normal people today. And then I thought, it's not quite what I had in mind. Belinda, can you forgive me? Okay, I apologize. Do you read aloud in class? Will you pick up in verse 5, please?
And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made a man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord.
I always think, even if everybody else is doing wrong, you can still choose to do right, can't you? Even if everybody else is doing wrong. Every mama that I've ever known has said something like that to her kids, right? It said, well, if everybody else jumped off a cliff, that was my mom's favorite saying, you know. So, I don't know, something about our parents' generation thought there were a lot of cliffs around, right? And you don't have to, right? So Noah, in spite of all the surroundings, still decided to be obedient to God. Go ahead.
But these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man, and perfect in his generation. And Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth.
All right, pause for just a second. And I might ask you to add 2 Timothy 3 and verse 13 to your reading. 2 Timothy 3 and verse 13. And Christy, would you read that one passage for me this morning? Is that okay? All right. At least I didn't ask if you read, right, Christy? So that's okay. 2 Timothy 3 and verse 13.
But evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived.
I think about that verse a lot. The tendency over time is for things to go from bad to worse, unless you put a stop to it, unless you make a conscious effort to stand against it. The general tendency is for sin to multiply across time. And so you might just think about 2 Timothy 3:13 with Belinda's reading here in Genesis chapter 6. Folks always wonder, we're about to read about gopher wood. There are 2 different thoughts. We don't know what gopher wood was. Everybody has a different idea. My dad thought it was cypress wood, which might be true, but it may also refer to how wood is treated. There's a thought that it refers to a way of preparing wood to be used in boats. I don't know if that's true or not, but I just thought I'd let you know about it. Yeah, like womanized lumber. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Belinda. Go ahead. Keep reading for me there. Where have you stopped? We were down to about gopher wood somewhere. What verse is that? 14. Yes, ma'am.
Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Roofs shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make of it. Make it up. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits.
So there are 2 different kinds of cubits in the Bible. We won't debate whether it's a longer or shorter cubit, but let's assume that a cubit is about 1.5 feet, about 18 inches. So if it's 300 cubits long, how many feet long? 450 feet long, right? And then if you take a look and it says that the width is 50 cubits, how wide would it be? 75, and the height 30 cubits? 45. So think about that. 450 feet long, 75 feet wide. How wide is this room, would y'all say? 30 feet maybe? What do you think, Jonathan? Maybe, yeah. Yeah. So just imagine, knocking out the wall and going back another 15 feet, 45 feet high and so forth. So It's a big boat. It's really a big boat. How many of y'all have visited the Ark there in Kentucky? I never have been. You know, I've seen pictures. Does it kind of dwarf your imagination when you get up close to it? Really something. You know, so just imagine a boat that size. Go ahead and finish out the reading for me, Belinda.
A window shalt thou make for the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it.
So it has 3 stories. And folks, the description there of the window, you know, like when I say window, I think about like a window over there. But most folks believe that it actually was like a long window, 18 inches or so, so down the length of the ark. That's usually, if you think about it, that's usually how it's pictured. Go ahead.
And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die.
Does that sound like a localized flood to y'all? You know, it's a real common thought that it's a low. And I'm thinking, why build the ark if it's just a local flood? Tell them to walk over there, you know, and get away from the localized flood. So it's a real common thought. A lot of progressive creationists and so forth believe it was a local flood, but that is not the picture here in the Bible at all. You know, it's going to talk about the waters being above the highest mountains, and all of flesh is going to be destroyed. And so the picture here, whether a person believes it, whether a person accepts it or not, is of a worldwide flood that, you know, kills everything except the life that's preserved there on the ark. Go ahead.
But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife and thy sons' wives with thee. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female.
Later on, we get a little more additional information. You first read that, it sounds like maybe he goes out and traps all the animals. But if you continue to read, what does it say? God does what? Yeah, God brings the animals to him. And so I was saying, boy, that'd be a lot of trapping to go out and try to trap all that. It says God brought the animals to him. We'll see that in just a little bit. Go ahead, Belinda, and finish it out for me.
Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food, for thee and for them. Thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he.
So everything that God commanded him to do, he did. So again, that's just a reflection of the faithfulness, I guess we would say, of Noah. So just be thinking about that as we continue to move toward our discussion of Noah's Ark. I'm going to ask you also to turn to Job 38 and verse 4. We start talking about creation and realize that there is a lot that we don't understand about this old world. You know, we have a lot of knowledge, but there is a lot that we don't know and that we don't understand. And as this morning, as we talk about radiometric dating, there is one main point I really want to drill down on. The main point I want us to remember about radiometric dating and how old things are is that all forms of it are subject to large errors. The more I study it, the more I see that. There's a lot that you don't know about what happened in times past because it's based on unknowable assumptions about the past. Do you all remember the warning in 2 Peter 3 and verse 4? What was the warning there? Thinking that we've got it figured out and all things continue just as they were. Anytime you hear thinking like that, you need to be on guard. Do y'all remember if you were here a couple of weeks ago, remember I asked you how long you thought this timer would take to go? And what's the problem with it? It works for about 15 seconds and then it stops. I have never seen a sand timer do that before, all right? You know, and so there are a lot you don't know. Do you remember the deal with Reagan and the water thing? And he was trying to balance how much is flowing out and how much is running in, and then Brother Evans comes along and dumps another gallon on top of it. There's just a lot that we don't know. And So just remember the warning there in 2 Peter 3 and verse 4. Mitch, do you have Job 38 and verse 4 for me?
Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding.
God is saying that you think about it for a second. In Job, were you around? You know how all that worked? Did you make the world? You know how I did all of that? You understand all of the chemical processes and so forth? And of course, the answer is no. All right. I want to see if I can drill down a little bit today and get us to come to a better understanding of radiometric dating. And I want to begin with something simple, and I'm going to go slowly here. And if at any point you don't understand something, just raise your hand or flag me down and ask me to go over that again. Think about all. Who said all of it? You got to watch out for old 7th grade teachers. Anyway, if you think about the fact that all material is made up of atoms, if you look down in the nucleus of an atom, what do you have in the nucleus of an atom? What kind of subatomic particles are in the nucleus of an atom? Say it again. Protons and neutrons. Okay, so proton and what kind of charge do protons have? And how about neutrons? Okay. They're neutral, and then orbiting around the nucleus, all right, you have what kind of subatomic particles? Okay, and electrons are what charge? And usually the number of electrons and the number of protons are the same, so that most atoms are electrically neutral, right? But some elements are unbalanced and tend to decay over time. And when the sun strikes our atmosphere, some of the nitrogen 14 in our atmosphere is converted to carbon 14. Nitrogen 14 has 7 protons and 7 neutrons in its nucleus, all right? But carbon 14 has 6 protons and 8 neutrons in its nucleus. And carbon 14 is unstable. And carbon 14 tends to break down into nitrogen 14 over time, right? So sun shines, strikes atmosphere. Some of the carbon 12 is converted to carbon, some of the nitrogen 14 is converted to carbon 14, and that carbon 14 then starts to decay back into nitrogen 14. And it does it at a steady rate. Now, brothers and sisters, everybody in here has radioactive carbon 14 inside of you. I hate to break the news to you, but you just do. You get it from the food chain. Plants take in through photosynthesis carbon. We either eat the plants or we eat the animals that eat the plants, right? And so we have radioactive carbon 14 inside of us. And as long as we continue to live and breathe and eat, we take in carbon 14. When we die, we stop taking in carbon 14. Every living thing stops taking in carbon 14. And the carbon 14 then starts to decay in our bodies at a rate that can be measured. We'll take a look at that in just a little bit, all right? So the theory is, and it at least sounds very scientific, the theory is that you can take a look at something that's dead, something that was once alive and once dead and now dead, and you can measure how much carbon 14 still is in it, and you can tell how long ago it died. All right? It's based on the idea that when we're alive, we have the same level of carbon 14 as the atmosphere around us. All right, that's the idea. Whatever carbon-14 is in the atmosphere, that's the level in Brother Evans. Just like Reagan, you were pouring in the water and the water was flowing out, then that's supposed to be stable. That's supposed to be at equilibrium. Anybody see any problem right there at the beginning? You're making an assumption, aren't you? You're making an assumption that the levels are at equilibrium. Yes, go ahead, Karen.
The atmosphere changes over time, so you have no idea how much carbon-14 is actually in that sort of.
You nailed it on the head. That's exactly right. And in fact, the last time scientists measured carbon-14 in the atmosphere, it's actually being produced faster than it's decaying inside of us. All right. So it's not at equilibrium. The carbon-14 dating is based on the assumption that it is at equilibrium. Mike?
Is that going on the assumption too that everything is at that equilibrium?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Because a vegetarian would seem to have more than a meat eater.
Okay, yes.
Because-
That's exactly what I was sitting here thinking. Like literally, like somebody that eats barbecue, right,
Yeah,
would have higher carbon, you would think, than a vegan.
well, you would think a vegan. would
This
have
took a
more.
different turn than I had in mind. This
We'll discuss it later.
It's not the number of carbon-14, it's the percentage of carbon-14 relative to the amount of normal carbon.
That's exactly right.
So no matter what you bring in, you're at that percentage, because you're bringing both in. That's the idea.
That's the idea. That's it. It sounds very scientific. I mean, it sounds good. Now, I wanted to show y'all something. Robin is so good. And by the way, I really want to publicly thank my wife, because whatever success we have in this class is due in large measure to Robin, because I've told y'all before, I get like 100 ideas a day, and Robin's main job is to tell me the 98 that are bad ideas, all right? Like last time, remember, Robin, I said, now see, I'm going to buy the Trinitite, which is the element, the radioactive element from the Manhattan Project, which is still available, and pass it around in class. And she said, you're not passing around radioactive elements in class, John. And then I saw that guy that dressed up in a T-Rex outfit, and I was going to, and Rob said, you're not having a dinosaur parade around in class. But anyway, Willard Libby, Dr. Willard Libby, is the fellow who invented carbon-14 dating at the University of Chicago, okay? And this is a trading card that shows him, Dr. Willard Libby. And look, I have his autograph back here. That's a genuine autograph of Dr. Willard Libby. And he won the Nobel Prize in 1960 for his work on radiocarbon dating. So this is what he looks like, and this is his genuine autograph there on the back. And I thought you might, somehow an autograph makes me feel closer to the person. And this is the book. It's actually the second edition. I couldn't afford a first edition. But a second edition where he describes how to date things with carbon-14. So that's the actual book there. All right. So you're exactly right, Mitch. What you said there exactly. So we ought to be able to measure those percentages and tell. All right. We'll have more to say about that in just a little bit. Main thing for y'all to remember is that carbon-14 can only be used to date things that are alive or that once were alive. All right. It has to be able to take it in. So plants, animals, that sort of thing. You don't use it to date rocks. Use it to date wood and coal and things like that. Uranium dating is usually used to date rocks, geological specimens. Okay? And we're going to talk about this in a little more detail. When I talk about a half-life of C14 and uranium-238, what does half-life mean? What does half-life mean?
Time it takes for it to deteriorate halfway.
Okay, so you have a lump of carbon-14 or you have a lump of uranium-238. How long does it take half of that to decay into whatever it's going to decay into? So how long does it take half of carbon-14 to decay back into nitrogen-14? And do y'all see it actually would never make it to zero? So, after a certain length of time, half of it is decayed, and then half of that is decayed, and half of that is decayed, and half of it, you would never get to absolute zero. Anybody know, here's your extra point, 5,000 bonus points, what the half-life of carbon-14 is? Yeah, that's exactly right. 5,730 years. 5,730 years is the half-life of carbon-14. Anybody know what the half-life of uranium-238 is? That's it. 4.5 billion years. All right? That's quite a difference, isn't it? All right? Uranium-238 eventually decays into lead. But you can see that that is a remarkable difference. Now, let me tell y'all that after 10 half-lives, we can no longer, our equipment, the way that we measure carbon-14, after 10 half-lives, can no longer measure it at all. That the amount of carbon-14 is so small that under current technology, we can no longer measure it after 10 half-lives. So that means you could not use carbon-14 to date anything that's older than what? Yeah, 50 to 60,000 years is the limit. And does anybody know what the technology is called that is used to measure carbon-14? What's that called? Good thing you came to Bible class today. Mass spectrometry. Mass spectrometry. All right? And I want to show y'all, when I first started studying this, I thought, now, how does that work? I mean, how does that work? First of all, I want y'all to take a look at this candle up here, if y'all would, please. I've been dying to do this, all right? And Mitch, if this goes sideways, these actually are fireproof mats. They really are, right? Do I have your interest? How long? Now, I know this candle's been burning since we've been in class, but let me say that I burned it before then, too. How long do y'all think that candle has been burning?
About 40 minutes.
A day or since or total?
Total. All right, Harper, very good. So Harper, explain that. Go over that again. Harper said, we don't know how tall it was to start with, Brother Evans. We don't know. And if you're wondering, I'm supposed to repeat the questions we have for the sake of the recording and so forth. So you'd have to know how tall it is. I mean, I could measure how fast it's going down. I could measure the temperature. I could do all that. But what if the candle was this tall when I started, or this tall, or whatever? I mean, unless you know what you started with, you're not going to know how long it was burning. Would everybody agree? So now let's guess. All right, Harper, you have any estimates? What do you think?
3 hours.
Okay, 3 hours. That's a good guess. Anybody want to? Since 8:30?
Many variables.
Anybody want to change their thinking? Yeah, it actually has been burning for how long it's been in this class, plus 30 seconds. All right? Why? Because you didn't expect me to pull out a blowtorch. All right? Point Brother Evans is trying to make is that unexpected things happen that you simply cannot account for. All right? And as soon as you find yourself saying, all things continue as they were, friends, you are violating what Scripture says. There is a lot. So, Harper, you were exactly right. We don't know how tall it was. Y'all didn't expect me to pull out a blowtorch, so you didn't know how long it's been burning. It hadn't been burning nearly as long as you thought because it was a lot hotter to start with. All right? You do not know. There are too many unknowable assumptions about the past for you to be able to guess. Now, I was hoping Corey was going to be here because Corey tells us that water is the universal solvent, all right? All right, okay, so how about groundwater? Could that affect how much of each element is inside of a sample?
Water is water, no matter what's in it, it's still water.
And a sample that's in one place might be affected more by groundwater than a sample in another place. Would y'all like to know how mass spectrometry, and this is going to be cool, how mass spectrometry works? I thought, how do they possibly separate out carbon-12 from carbon-14? I mean, how do you do that kind of testing? Well, here's what they do. You take a sample and you burn it down. It's called graphitization. You burn it down until it's just powder. And then you take that powder and you bombard it with an electron beam. You charge it with electrons, which are negative, all right? And you shoot it down a long tube. So you have this graphite, this burned sample that is now electrically charged, and you shoot it down a long tube, and they have powerful magnets that are set up, and they start pulling those carbon atoms. And because carbon-12 is lighter than carbon-14, carbon-12 tends to clump up over here, and carbon-14 clumps up farther down the way. And now we can look and compare how much carbon-14 is there to carbon-12. You burn the sample, you charge the sample, you shoot the sample, and the magnets then draw the sample, and you separate out the carbon-12 from the carbon-14. Is that not halfway cool? All right. So Brother Evans is going to show you how that works, all right? And I told Robin, I said, I need your hairdryer. And she said, why? I said, for science, hon. It's all for science, all right? All right, so, and then I got to turn this on. All right. Lighter carbon-12. Heavier carbon-14. All right? Magnet, sort of. All right? We're shooting it down the tube. All right? So, all right? Pretty cool, huh? All right? But along comes the carbon-14 atom. Huh? Ah, okay. That one, and there'll be some variation. Huh? Oh. And so if y'all are wondering how they separate out carbon-12 from carbon-14, the average of where the carbon-12 lands is going to be slightly different than the average of where the carbon-14 lands. And that's how they figure out how old something is. Right? But again, all of that is based on a lot of unknowable assumptions about the past. That's the main point that I want everybody to bear in mind. All right. Now, I want to talk to y'all for dinner. We're almost out of time this morning. But I want to talk to y'all, and Mitch, really key on what I'm about to say, because this is a problem that I think you'll appreciate. Who is Gregor Mendel? Who is Gregor Mendel? Huh? That's exactly right. Gregor Mendel was the Austrian monk who figured out the inheritance laws. The laws are like, you cross a purple flowered pea plant with a white flowered pea plant, and what does the first generation look like? Do y'all know this is all that he ever wrote? That is it. That is all Gregor Mendel ever wrote right there. Right? All right. Now, Mitch, I'm going to get you to a problem here in just a second. I want to ask you something. When Gregor Mendel when he completed his work, and he wrote down what happens when you cross this pea plant with this pea plant, this pea plant with this pea plant, then what happens if you cross them back. When he did all of that, the results he showed, Mitch, were accurate. The results he showed were accurate. But Mitch, the problem is they were too accurate. In other words, when you make those crosses, there's going to be some variation, slight variation, random chance. So yes, the crosses work and they give you these results, but there's some variation in the results. That's the way things normally work. Ronald Fisher came along and looked at Mendel's results and he said, yeah, those are true, those are right. But he said, they're too right. They're too exact. Now, I have a question for y'all. How is it that Mendel found something that was true and his results were accurate, but they were too accurate? What would that tend to indicate to you? What do y'all think? Any thoughts on that? So he found something that's right. He didn't make it up. It is accurate. It is right, but it's too accurate. It's too right. Any thoughts on that, Julie? What do you think? Okay, explain what you're saying there a little bit more. Okay, so, but I like where you're going with that. You said he didn't explain the variations. Yes, go ahead.
I don't think well, possibly, but he didn't include all of his results.
Okay, all right. What do you think, Christy?
It would be like you not showing us your experiment with all the different variations.
Yes, that's right. So I just, I say, well, these are too close. I'll kind of take those out of the way there or whatever, right?
Show us only the best video of one. And the best video
Do y'all suppose in science that it ever happens that scientists only report the results that fit what they want you to find out about? All right? Do y'all suppose that that ever happens? Man, it happens all the time. All right? And let me see if I can't show that to you. This is a key point. Stick with me here. Dr. J. Ogden III in the Annals of the New York Academy of Science. Now, you're not going to find that journal at HEB, okay? This is one of those peer-reviewed scientific scholarly journals. He said, it may come as a shock to some, but fewer than 50% of the radiocarbon dates from geological and archaeological samples in northeastern America have been adopted as acceptable by investigators. Let that sink in for a minute. What is he saying there?
The samples or the results?
Well, he's talking about the results.
Okay.
What do y'all think he's telling you there? Okay. He's saying, and he's saying this to fellow scientists, all right, in a peer-reviewed journal. He said, fellas, you have to realize that we're not reporting the results that contradict what we believe. We're not reporting the variations, and that, take a look at it again, fewer than half of the radiocarbon dates actually are being reported. If I only report to y'all the statistics that I want to report to you, if I did all of this and I grabbed these and put these over here and didn't show you the variation, that would not be right. That would not be accurate, would it? That would not be accurate. And friends, if you don't get anything out of the class today, remember that scientists are just as prone to do that as any of the rest of us are. Right? How about this one? Dr. Kurt Sewell, he said uranium salts, so think about uranium-238, are water soluble, and most minerals are subject to unequal leaching of chemical components. All right, what's he telling you there? He's saying, well, groundwater does affect what chemicals are found inside of samples. Dr. Robert Lee, in the Anthropological Journal of Canada said radiocarbon dates on bone have never been satisfactory. Right? Do you see what these folks are all telling you? They're telling you we tend to accept radiocarbon dates and uranium dating as being scientific, being accurate, being something that you can absolutely rely on, when actually what? There are a lot of unknowable assumptions that are being included in it. And I believe I can show you that as we continue to develop our thoughts later on. And what God would say is, where were you when I made the world? You think you've got it all figured out? You think all things continue as they were from the very beginning? Better not. Right? Anyway, I think that is a good point to keep in mind. Y'all take a look at the last question down here. What do I mean when I talk about exploring the advantages of studying primary sources of information versus secondary sources?
Just like in the law, secondhand information is not acceptable.
Okay, have y'all ever been fooled by unconfirmed secondhand information? All of the time. And one of the main ways I've made mistakes in my life is by relying on secondhand, unconfirmed information. For example, if you want to know what Mendel really thought, how about read Mendel's book? All right? If you want to know what Charles Darwin actually thought, how about read his book? Not what somebody said about it. For example, he's known as the father of evolution. Would it shock you if I told you that he doesn't use the word evolution a single time in the entire book? The only time it's used is the word evolved in the last word of the last sentence. And he doesn't use the word evolution at all. Somebody told me the other day that Charles Darwin didn't actually believe that we descended from apes. And I thought, well, now that's an interesting statement. And so I read his book. The early progenitors of man must have once been covered with hair, both sexes having beards. Their ears were probably pointed and capable of movement. Their bodies provided with a tail, having the proper muscles. And then it goes down and says, it talks about man having descended from the simian family, which is the ape family. All right? Did he believe we descended from apes? He tells you. All you got to do is to read his book. You want to get the straight skinny. If you want to know what somebody actually thinks, go to the source. And I'll tell you right now, there is only one person who was there, if I can use the word person in this way, at the very beginning of time, at the creation of the world, and that is God. And if you want to know the truth, you have to go to God's Word. All right? Now, we're going to have more to say about that. Look, that silly thing has already stopped running. We're going to have more to say about that in coming lessons, and we have at least one more class on radiometric dating. But the main point I want you to take with you this morning is, don't imagine that those radio dates are absolutely true and that there's no wiggle room and you can absolutely rely on them. Remember the quotations that I gave you over here, and remember that all forms are subject to large errors because they are based on unknowable assumptions about the past. Anybody have a question or comment just on what we've talked about this morning? All right. I think that's a good place to stop for us today. Thank y'all so much for your kind attention. And we'll pick up there next week.